Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Time Out for Anesthesia. I'm your host, David Henderson. So glad to have you here, and especially glad to have our guest, a returning guest this time, CEO of Graphium Health, Daniel Dura. I affectionately call him Danny. I don't know if I've ever heard anybody call you Daniel in real
Actually, that's
life.
what everybody usually calls me. So Daniel is
Really?
like, yeah, that Daniel's what my mother called me when she was mad at me. So
Yeah.
let's
Yeah,
we'll
that's what
stick
I was
with
gonna
Danny.
say. I was gonna say if I ever call you Danny, it would be like my wife calling me David instead of Honey or something like that. That's when I know. Um, well, great to have you back on, Danny. You've been doing okay?
I'm doing great. No, it's fun to be back on. I know you've been trying to get me back on for a while, so this is
Yeah.
we cleared out some time in the schedule, and yeah, hopefully we can chat about some fun stuff.
Well, thank you so much for doing that. And really, I had a very specific reason for inviting you back on because you and I were having a conversation the other day and something pinged, and I thought, wow, that is a really interesting and important topic. And I wanted to bring it back up and I wanted our audience to hear a little bit more about it just because um, I think it's something that it's a relatively new idea, and it's a concept that if we can kind of add it to the way that we think about technology purposes,
Yeah.
technology purchases also, I think it levels things out. And that concept that you mentioned the other day is called time to value, or
Yep.
TTV. And so just to start with, can you just give us kind of your definition of time to
Yeah,
value?
I'll try to keep it pretty casual. Time to value it's something that they talk a lot more about in kind of the SaaS world these days, the software as a service world, but it really does apply to pretty much any business. It again doesn't matter if you're an anesthesia practice or a bank or whatever. But the idea is it is a measure of the time that it takes from a customer purchasing your product to actually getting having kind of that moment of realization that they're getting value out of it. And sometimes I think people call that, like, this is an aha moment, right? That's one of the
Okay.
things you'll hear if you like look up definitions of this. But it's I think that's a great way to kind of put it. It's like, when does that customer have that moment where they're just like, oh, that was great, that was awesome, that was exactly what I was looking for. And so it's something that you try to reduce the time on, obviously, and the shorter you can get it, the better. On top of that, you want it to be something that a customer can usually reach on their own in a fairly easy way, right? You don't want it to be something where I have to hand hold you very specifically through it. You want them to be able to come to the realization on their own that they're getting value out of your
Okay.
product or your service. So
Got it. That makes sense. And I'm hearing a little bit of distinction, but this is a little bit different from ROI, return on investment.
yeah,
And
yeah, ROI, similar, very similar concepts, right? In the sense that they're looking at value, right? ROI is a measure of value. But it very specifically usually looks at how much have I put into this. What is it going to take for me to invest in this platform versus what am I getting back? And it's a measure of the difference of those things. Obviously, you always want it to be in the positive. So if I'm going to spend, $1,000 and I'm going to invest this amount of time into the product, what is it returning to me at some specific point in the future? And usually that's a little further out. Most ROI is seen over time. And so, if you're doing like an RFP, you kind of calculate that out and you try to figure out, what's my ROI and what's the lifetime, value of the product, and what's my working investment going to be in the product. But it's a similar kind of idea. I think the difference with time to value is it's actually probably more of a personal thing for each user. And that's what you kind of want to look at, is you want to look at your individual user roles. And if I have a user who is you know, for example, in our case, a frontline provider who's on the front line, who's using our application every day. What they want to see is very different than the back office administrator. They're going to measure value in different ways, and you want to look at each of them and say, how do I help that person get to that aha moment the quickest, right? And so
Right.
that's where you kind of approach it in a bit of a different way.
So diving a little bit deeper into what you just said, um, the idea of value itself is a little bit liquid, right? Because when we first approach a project, the value of users, I can see over the course of time, I can see the values even of Graphium users. I can see that their value has changed over time just because of their
Yeah.
acquaintance with technology. So I could see challenges such as a really lengthy onboarding time. Well, if technology has gone obsolete by the end of an onboarding time, all of a sudden this time to value thing is all over the place, and maybe it changes, or maybe the technology just isn't valuable.
Yeah.
Maybe it becomes impossible. Also, like you said, you're dealing with people, right? So
Yeah.
whose value is what, things like that.
Well,
Sorry,
and
go
this
ahead.
is no, and this is that. I mean, that's an incredible point, and definitely something you have to consider is that time to value, number one, depends on the person, right? Again, it's a very personal thing, which means number one, you have to understand your customer incredibly well, and a lot of people think they do. I mean, there are moments where we think we
Right.
do, and then we learn things about them. We have to adjust that perception that we have of our customer and what are they looking for out of this product. It depends on the customer segment, you know. And for us, like I mean, right now, I think we divide our customer segments into about 14 or 15 different segments, which is insane when you think about it. There's a lot more than that. And in between each of those, there's multiple subsets of segments depending on the user. You have to know each of those very, very well to be able to address this, because if you don't know them first, how can you tailor your product, tailor your experience or your service to meet those individual needs as quickly as possible? And so it is one of those things where you have to really first understand who it is, who your client is, and then secondly, you've got to back that up by going, to your point, how's that change over time? Because
Right.
what they value today, what people valued in January of 2020 was very different than what they valued in April of 2020.
Right.
Right. And if you were, still trying to get them to quote value in April 2020 using the same thing you were doing in January, you were going to fail very quickly. And so, in times like that, and we're kind of entering another one of those times right now where there's going to be a lot of transition, you really have to stay on top of it and constantly be looking at, okay, are they telling me they're getting value? And if they're not, what is the thing that I need to do to get them to what they think they need, right? Because that's what
Right.
matters, obviously, is what the customer needs.
Yeah, completely right. And even now, pandemic is one thing, stagflation and concerns of
Yep.
economy are another thing. Another thing that I think affects where value lies for different people, for different users of Graphium, for instance, in the anesthesia world, are rules and regulations,
Yeah.
right? That are kind of a moving target. One that we deal with a lot of time is macro, right? The rules
Yep.
of macro change every year.
Oh,
Um,
100%.
and not only that, but now we have one of the bigger topics that's coming out, not just in anesthesia, but healthcare kind of nationwide, is the No Surprises Act.
Yeah.
And that's changed. I mean, so now with those, one thing that's changing all the time every year, and one thing that's kind of new on the scene and changing a lot of things really quickly, all of a sudden, values have shifted around those ideas, and
Yeah.
the ability of technology or a company to address those things and be able to pivot towards understand those things and pivot towards those things contributes, I think, to the time to value a lot of the
No,
time.
no doubt. And that's where, like, you have to be very open to kind of analyze, your business and the market, and be very open to the fact that, number one, your platform may not solve all their needs right now. And you have to be open to ideas of how you may help them with that otherwise, right? And so,
Right.
government regulation is a perfect example. Like, every year macro changes. And I mean, even during the year, especially the last few years with COVID, it changes during the year where suddenly the government says, yeah, no, really, most of you don't need to do that this year. Well, suddenly something that our customers focused on for 9 months suddenly gets, pulled out from under them. Their values inherently shift, right? And now they're going to relook at your software platform and go, well, what's it doing for me now, right? You have to be able to message around that. You have to be able to tell a story around that. And again, look at them and have a conversation with them to say, how can I help you now? Software as a service especially is an interesting thing. Yes, we're providing a software platform. Yes, we are also providing a service. That means having to be nimble, being able to change your platform very quickly to meet the needs, of your customer. But most importantly, again, having that constant communication. I obviously kind of, grew my chops in the, box software world. I mean, that's where, we had, it was every 18 to 24 months is when we would ship out a gold master to the company for provisioning, and they would, ship millions of boxes of cellophane software out to customers, right? If I start today, like it's going to be 2 years before my customer sees my product. That's a very different concept. And unfortunately, a lot of those ideas and the way we think about things is kind of held over. We've got to get rid of that. It's about having constant communication, iterating quickly, understanding them, being able to translate those needs into something that can actually help them. And then the last part, which is again, time to value, is like, how do I get them to realize that they're getting the value? Because again, this is one of the big problems with time to value I see with a lot of startups. They actually may be delivering value, but their customers don't know it. And that's kind of the last part of this, which is, well, you can do everything you want. If they don't think you're delivering value, are you? Like if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around, does anybody hear it? Right? I mean, it's this idea that like you could actually be delivering an incredible amount of value. If the customer doesn't know it, doesn't matter at all. So how do you get them to realize, that you're delivering that value?
Right. Totally right. And then from the other perspective, I think a company, if a user is looking for a company, they can use this concept to figure out, okay, are these people dedicated to my cause and my value over time? And I think, like you said, on the part of the company, you're looking for a company that's humble enough to listen, and to recognize, who's smart enough to make it happen across time. And, it might be that they're humble enough for it, but they can't do much about it because they don't have a team of engineers, for instance, who can really make stuff happen. And then finally, are they hungry for that value as well? Do they desire you to feel the value enough to where they're going to use those smarts to go and figure things out on your behalf?
100%. And again, it does always come back to culture. It comes back to, and this is where, for us in particular, working with the right customers is important, right? Because this is a relationship. This is something where, and this is not unique to us. This is every, software as a service startup has to approach this as, am I connecting with my customers in a meaningful way? Do I have the right culture, that I can share with them so that we can jointly embark on this adventure together, right? And look, we all do great sometimes, and sometimes we drop the ball, and on both sides, right? Sometimes our customers drop the ball, sometimes we drop the ball. Let's be honest, we all make mistakes at times. The reality is, do you have a relationship that allows you to do that, allows you to make mistakes, allows you to try to move forward? If you do, all tides raise ships, right? I mean, it's at the end of the day, we're going to, we're all going to rise together if we do this in the right way. And that's where I think we just have to remember that, it always will come back to the relationship you have. It will always come back to how you communicate. It'll always come back to your team, on the software side and on the customer side. Like, are they humble enough to communicate? It's hard sometimes for people, customers especially, to communicate where things are not going well, right? Trying to get them to open up and say, I'm not seeing this. They may feel pressure that a boss, approved this purchase of software and is saying, hey, that's working great, isn't it? And they're like, yeah, it's working great. And yet behind the scenes, they're like stressed out because they can't figure out something. That doesn't help you as the vendor. It doesn't help them as a customer. It requires a bit of vulnerability on their side. And then on our side to go, when somebody comes to us and says, hey, I'm really struggling with this. And if you don't have an answer to it, like you're like, hey, my software platform doesn't meet that need. Are you being open about that? Going, you know what, we really don't have a good answer for that right now. But we'd love to sit down with you and understand what you're doing there so that we can come up with one. And so
Perfect.
There's a lot of culture that has to obviously kind of, exist between you and your customers. It has to exist inside your organization first, right? And it has to exist in theirs. That's again why it's good to pick good customers. You want to work with the best, because they help you as much as you'll be able to help them.
Right. Well, Danny, I thank you so much. I think I really admire your mindset about the relationship between a customer and a company. And I don't think that it's something you're going to find very frequently. Right. And
well, we'll talk about your bonus later then, David, for the
year. Yeah. Also, your hair looks really nice today.
Thank you. Appreciate that. No, thank you. I mean, it's a great topic, honestly. Like I really, it was really cool that you kind of picked that out. And it's something that, again, hopefully we can all, I learned it by listening to other people. Hopefully somebody gets some value out of this as well. So
yeah, no, I definitely think they will. And yeah, I'll continue to pick things out of our conversations that you won't expect, and we'll just keep having episode after episode.
Works for me.
All right, Danny. Well, thank you so much for being here, and everybody here, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time on the next episode of Time Out for Anesthesia. Bye-bye.